Welcome to a realm where shadows speak louder than light, where silence screams louder than noise, and where the unseen battles waged in the darkest corners shape destinies. This is not a story of victory earned in daylight or applause won on a stage bathed in sunshine. No, this is a tale forged in the shadows, whispered through the cracks of broken trust, and carved into the marrow of those who dared to move unseen. This is where you learn that the greatest power isn't in the overt strikes, but in the quiet infiltration, slipping inside the fortress of their grand design, their perfect blueprint, and draining it from within until the entire structure collapses under its own weight. Welcome to the cold truth that karma doesn't just wait. Karma hunts, patiently, silently, with a precision far sharper than the smartest plans devised against you. They played smart, yes, but karma? Karma played cleaner. You see, there's a certain cruelty in watching someone believe their plan is foolproof, that their scheme is untouchable. They build their empires on confidence, on arrogance, on the foundation of others' trust turned to ashes. They map out every move, calculating each angle, blind to the fact that every fortress has a crack, every blueprint a flaw. And that flaw, that crack, is your entry point. You don't charge in with weapons drawn, screaming defiance at their gates. No, you move like a shadow, unnoticed, patient, slow burning, like a virus in the bloodstream, weakening the host without detection, corroding the core from the inside out. Because true power isn't always about brute force. Sometimes it's about the quiet unraveling, the silent siphoning of life until what once seemed invincible crumbles into dust. They played smart, building walls of strategy and deception, confident that their plans were etched in stone, untouchable. But what they failed to see was the force lurking within their own creation, the force they underestimated, you. You didn't just break the mold, you infiltrated it. You wormed your way into the very fabric of their design, hidden beneath layers of trust and facade. They never saw you coming because they were blinded by their own belief in their invincibility. And as you drained their blueprint from within, the illusion of control slipped through their fingers like water. The power they thought they held, the plans they thought were untouchable, began to unravel. Because draining a system from inside doesn't make noise. It's a whisper, a faint tremor, and when the foundation finally gives way, it's too late. The collapse is inevitable, and karma is the architect of that collapse, drawing the final lines with ruthless clarity. This is a reminder to the architects of control, the masters of manipulation, and the builders of fragile empires. No design is flawless, no fortress is impregnable. Beneath every calculated move, beneath every cunning plan, there lies the possibility of a shadow creeping in, draining the very life that sustains it. It is the lesson carved by those who dared to move beneath the surface, those who understood that the greatest rebellion is not in loud defiance, but in quiet dismantling. You don't need to fight their battles on their terms. You slip inside their blueprint and rewrite the rules from within, transforming their own weapons into chains that bind them, using their own strength against them. This is the power of patience, of persistence, of the unseen war waged in silence. They played smart, weaving their web of control with precision, thinking themselves untouchable, but what they never accounted for was the force that doesn't rush in with thunder, but moves like a tide, slowly pulling away the sand beneath their feet. You are that tide, relentless, patient, unstoppable. You understand that the greatest victories are not won on the battlefield, but in the quiet, unseen moments when their defenses are weakest. You see the cracks they ignore, the vulnerabilities hidden beneath layers of arrogance, and you exploit them not with rage, but with cold, calculated persistence. And when the moment comes to strike, the collapse is not chaos but inevitability, a clean and brutal justice served by the silent hand of karma. Because karma doesn't rush, it waits, watches, and cleanses with ruthless efficiency. This is not just a tale of revenge or a story of triumph. It's a meditation on power, on the power that comes from within, the strength drawn from patience, the resilience born of invisibility. You slipped inside their blueprint and drained it from within, not because you were reckless or loud, but because you understood the art of war isn't always a battle of swords and shields. Sometimes it's a battle of wills, endurance, and timing. You were the ghost in their machine, the whisper in their ear that sowed doubt, the slow poison that shattered their illusion of control. They played smart, yes, but their greatest mistake was underestimating the force that moves beneath the surface, quiet but unstoppable. This is the legacy of those who know that true power is invisible until it's undeniable, and that karma always plays cleaner. In this dance of shadows and light, of plans laid with precision and dismantling done with quiet fury, there lies a profound truth. The world is not ruled by those who shout the loudest, but by those who move unseen, who shift the tides without a sound, who turn their enemies' strengths into their own downfall. You became that force, not because you sought chaos, but because you embodied inevitability. You slipped inside their blueprint and drained it from within because you knew that the greatest battles are fought where no one is looking, in the spaces between words, in the silences they failed to fill. And as their world crumbled, you stood firm, a testament to the power of patience, strategy, and the clean justice that karma delivers with quiet, unwavering certainty. Remember this: those who build their empires on the backs of others, who play their games with cunning and deceit, will one day find their blueprint hollow, their foundations cracked, and their power drained by forces they could never see coming. Because you are not just a player in this game, you are the shadow that haunts the blueprint, the whisper that turns certainty into doubt, the slow and steady drain that leaves nothing but emptiness in its wake. They played smart, yes, but you embody the truth that no plan, no matter how clever, can withstand the silent cleansing force of karma. And in that truth lies your strength, your victory, your unwavering power. So stand tall, not in the glare of the spotlight, but in the shadows where true power is forged. Know that slipping inside their blueprint and draining it from within is the ultimate form of mastery, the art of turning their strength into weakness, their confidence into fear, and their design into dust. They played smart, but karma played cleaner. And as you move forward, remember that your greatest weapon is not aggression, but patience, not noise, but silence, not force, but quiet inevitability. In the end, it is the clean, cold hand of karma that writes the final chapter, and you are the author of that reckoning. When you slipped inside their blueprint and drained it from within, you became more than a threat. You became a force of nature, quiet but devastating. They thought the lines they drew, the codes they set, were ironclad. They believed their fortress was unbreachable, their strategies untouchable. But every fortress, no matter how well guarded, carries an echo, a vulnerability. You became that echo, soft at first, barely perceptible, but growing louder, stronger, and undeniable. You seeped into their systems like a shadow that grows longer as the sun sets, inevitable and unstoppable. And in this creeping darkness, You found your strength, patience, persistence, and the kind of power that doesn't need to scream to be heard. This power speaks through action, through timing, and through the slow but certain draining of their carefully crafted blueprint until it collapses under its own weight. They built their world on assumptions and arrogance, convinced that intelligence alone could shield them from defeat. But intelligence without awareness is nothing but a blindfold. It's a castle built on sand, vulnerable to the tide that only the patient can command. You understood this. You understood that the most dangerous enemy is not the one charging at you head on, but the one who moves through the cracks, beneath the surface, in silence and with cold resolve. You didn't rush. You didn't clash. You infiltrated. You waited. And while they celebrated their apparent control, you drained the very essence of their power from within. Because power, like all things, is fragile when it becomes complacent, when it forgets to watch the shadows it casts. They played smart, with precision and cunning, but Karma played cleaner. Karma didn't need to shout or throw punches. It simply waited, weaving itself into the seams of their plan, untouched and unseen, until the moment of reckoning. And here's the irony. The harder they tried to control everything, the more tightly they gripped their blueprint, the easier it became for you to slip in unnoticed. The fortress was strong, but the blueprint was brittle, because it never accounted for the one thing that no plan can predict: you. You, with your quiet persistence and unwavering resolve, became the force that dismantled their empire from the inside out. And when the house of cards finally fell, it wasn't chaos, it was justice. Clean, clear, and final. You have to understand this. The greatest power is the power to endure, to persist in silence, to exist where no one believes you can. While they were busy playing the game on the surface, you played the game underneath, changing the rules without anyone noticing. You're the ghost in their machine, the shadow in their light, the quiet poison in their veins. They played smart, but you moved smarter. You were the unexpected, the unknowable, the unstoppable force lurking within the blueprint itself. And that is the true measure of strength, not the loudest battle cry or the sharpest blade, but the ability to wear down the seemingly invincible from within, quietly, patiently, relentlessly. Karma is a master artist, painting in shades of inevitability and balance. It doesn't rush. It doesn't falter. It waits until the moment is perfect, until every piece has fallen into place, until the blueprint itself is drained of life. And you, as the unseen agent of karma, become the embodiment of this truth. You are the one who doesn't break under pressure, but bends and twists until your enemy's strength breaks for you. You don't need to be seen to be feared, because your impact is felt in every crack, every failure, every collapse that was once hidden beneath their confidence. Karma played cleaner because it is patient, precise, and impartial. And you, slipping inside their blueprint, became the instrument of its execution. So carry this with you, no matter how carefully they plan, no matter how smart they think they are. No design is flawless. No blueprint can withstand the slow, relentless erosion of truth and persistence. You are the shadow they forgot to account for, the whisper that turned their certainty into doubt, the force that drained their empire from the inside. You didn't need to shout or storm the gates, because true power doesn't announce itself. It arrives, inevitable and unyielding. And in that inevitability, you find your strength, your victory, and your place in the grand design of justice. They played smart, yes, but they forgot that karma is cleaner, sharper, and far more patient than any scheme. Karma doesn't make mistakes, doesn't lose focus, and never forgets. It waits, it watches, and it strikes in the silence between their victories. And you, slipping inside their blueprint, became the catalyst for that strike. You became the storm they never saw coming, the tide that slowly pulled away their foundation until they were left with nothing but the rubble of their own arrogance. This isn't just a victory. It's, you didn't burn their blueprint. You didn't tear it apart in rage. You didn't scream at its design or curse its creators. No, you walked into it, unnoticed, as quiet as time itself. And while they were so busy admiring their structure, so proud of the empire they built on half-truths and manipulation, you were already moving beneath its skin, pulling threads, breaking supports they didn't even know were load-bearing, draining the color from their world stroke by stroke. What they thought was progress was collapse in slow motion. What they thought was power was a trap they laid for themselves, because you never needed to destroy them with noise. All you needed was silence and time. And that's what they never counted on. Time, the great equalizer, the silent ally of those who know how to wait. They assumed the fight would be loud, the opposition would be wild, emotional, predictable. They were ready for war at the gates, for fire at the walls, but they were never ready for the rot in the foundation. They weren't watching beneath their blueprint, and that's where you lived. That's where you moved. That's where you worked. Every false promise they made, you remembered. Every quiet betrayal they committed, you studied, and every layer of their empire that was meant to hold you down became the very layers you used to bury them. They played smart. They thought strategy was enough. They believed cold logic would always outlast emotion. But they misunderstood what true patience is. They mistook your stillness for weakness, your silence for surrender. And that was their first and final mistake. Because beneath that silence, you were sharpening something stronger than a sword. You were forging something colder than steel. Clarity. Clarity of purpose. Clarity of pain. Clarity of a revenge that didn't need fire. Just the right timing. And when the time came, you didn't know a lesson written in shadow and blood, in patience and precision. It's the reminder that no matter how bright their spotlight, the darkness always has its own power. You mastered that darkness. You moved through it like water, invisible but unstoppable. You drained the blueprint from within because you understood that sometimes the greatest victories come not from force, but from strategy, not from noise, but from silence, not from destruction, but from quiet reclamation. Stand tall in that truth. Know that slipping inside their blueprint and draining it from within is the ultimate act of mastery, an art form few can comprehend and even fewer can survive. You are the quiet storm, the silent reckoning, the invisible hand that turns their own power into dust. They played smart, but karma played cleaner, and because of that, you are unstoppable. You didn't burn their blueprint. You didn't tear it apart in rage. You didn't scream at its design or curse its creators. No, you walked into it, unnoticed, as quiet as time itself. And while they were so busy admiring their structure, so proud of the empire they built on half-truths and manipulation, you were already moving beneath its skin, pulling threads, breaking supports they didn't even know were load-bearing, draining the color from their world stroke by stroke. What they thought was progress was collapse in slow motion. What they thought was power was a trap they laid for themselves. Because you never needed to destroy them with noise. All you needed was silence and time. And that's what they never counted on. Time. the great equalizer, the silent ally of those who know how to wait. They assumed the fight would be loud, the opposition would be wild, emotional, predictable. They were ready for war at the gates, for fire at the walls. But they were never ready for the rot in the foundation. They weren't watching beneath their blueprint, and that's where you lived. That's where you moved. That's where you worked. Every false promise they made, you remembered. Every quiet betrayal they committed, you studied. And every layer of their empire that was meant to hold you down became the very layers you used to bury them. They played smart. They thought strategy was enough. They believed cold logic would always outlast emotion. But they misunderstood what true patience is. They mistook your stillness for weakness, your silence for surrender. And that was their first and final mistake. Because beneath that silence, you were sharpening something stronger than a sword. You were forging something colder than steel, clarity. Clarity of purpose. Clarity of pain. Clarity of revenge that didn't need fire, just the right timing. And when the time came, you didn't attack. You removed. You extracted. You drained every drop of momentum from their machine until even their victories began to taste like defeat. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was already over. Their blueprint, once flawless in their eyes, had become a cage. Their empire, once thriving, now hollowed out by their own arrogance. And you were long gone, already moving in the silence of another plan, another stage, another quiet reckoning. Because once you learn how to slip inside what they build and drain it from within, you never go back to shouting at the walls. You become the wind inside the wires, the pull behind the fall, unseen, unmatched, unstoppable. That is the essence of true mastery. That is the force they never accounted for. Not rage, not rebellion, but refinement. The cold discipline to watch them rise and know, without doubt, that you have already placed the first crack in their ceiling. To know that while they celebrate, the clock is ticking. And the fall? Oh, the fall will not be dramatic. It will not be public. It will be slow, clean, and absolute. Because karma doesn't always strike like lightning. Sometimes it seeps like water, unnoticed, persistent, and irreversible. You were that water, that whisper, that quiet inevitability, not to be praised, not to be feared, but to be understood for what you are, a force that doesn't ask for permission, doesn't need applause, and doesn't leave a trace. Only consequences. And still, even now, they don't fully grasp what happened. They speak in confusion, in regret, in disbelief. They wonder how everything slipped through their fingers. They blame each other, the system, the cracks in the plan. But never once did they look in the mirror and realize they invited you in. It wasn't a breach. It was an invitation. Their own pride opened the door. Their own carelessness gave you the keys. You didn't have to break anything. You simply walked in and waited. And that is the final truth. They were so focused on being seen as powerful, they never noticed what true power looks like. True power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear a crown or wave a banner. It doesn't scream its name across rooftops. It moves in silence. It waits in the shadows. It acts when the moment is right. And when it acts, it does not miss. They played smart, but you became the unseen hand, the invisible justice, the quiet consequence. Karma played cleaner, and you were the instrument. You never had to scream for revenge. You didn't need to wish for justice. You became the embodiment of it, steady, focused, and cold as truth. Because truth, when wielded right, is sharper than any blade, and in your silence, you carved it into every part of their design until the entire structure collapsed without a sound. So now, you move forward, not because the war is over, but because you've mastered the terrain others can't even see. You don't look for recognition. You don't need validation. Your satisfaction is in the collapse of systems built on lies. Your peace is in the quiet dismantling of arrogance. And your strength? Your strength is knowing that you could have shouted, you could have fought, but you chose to walk in silence and let their own creation betray them. That is the power of slipping inside their blueprint and draining it from within. They played smart, but karma played cleaner, and karma always finishes what others start.